Hi, this is Lee from the Bar Exam Toolbox and the Law School Toolbox. Welcome back. 'Tis the season for bar results. So in today's podcast, we're sharing common questions we receive from bar takers seeking advice about studying again. Next up is another question I think I almost get every single time we speak to somebody on the phone. When should I start studying, especially if I'm going to be working and studying?
Well, I think the answer to this question is very easy. As soon as possible. Like today.
Today. Yes. I mean, you need to start studying as soon as you can because working while studying, especially, presents an additional challenge. This is the thing I see over and over again is you end up using your best brain at work and then you're trying to study with an exhausted brain. So it's not even that all your study is going to be the highest impact study. So not only do you need to find time to study, you need to get creative with how you're going to spend your time studying. So perhaps you get up early and you study in the morning before work. Maybe you can go to work 30 minutes later so you can get a couple hours of studying in. That would be horrible for you, Allison, because you're definitely not a morning person.
Yeah.
But for morning people, that could be very good. Maybe you talk to your boss and you're able to work remotely to eliminate some commute time and you could get some extra study time in that way. But perhaps you need to find other ways to study when you're fresh. Perhaps you try and get off work a little bit early and then, go for a walk and come home having had a break from your computer. But there are a lot of challenges around this. I also think that when you're working, a lot of stuff can go sideways. Your job can all of a sudden have an emergency, which could prevent you from studying as much. And then I always have to say, even if you're not working and studying, especially for the February exam, people get sick all the time. And sometimes you lose like a week from getting sick.
Yeah. No, exactly. And I think if you are working, it might be worth it to think of creative ways that you could kind of get that fresh study time. So, for example, if you need to work 40 hours in a week, maybe you don't need to do 8 hours a day. Maybe you could do 4 hours a day where you're working 10 hours or 4 days a week where you're working 10 hours. Because that's the same 40 hours and it may not matter to anyone. But then you just basically commit, okay, I'm pretty much not going to be studying that much for those 4 days because those are going to be very intense work days. But then I get a whole extra day that I can do, a lot of work. So I think that's often a fair trade for people because I would rather have somebody, take those 8 hours that maybe they're going to try to study after work and put them in one day. And that's just going to open up a lot better study time than trying to do it bit by bit.
I've also had folks take vacation days to take a Friday off, a number of Fridays in a row, if they're not able to do the 40 and 4.
Yeah.
So if your job's like, I can't give you weeks off because it's too much of a burden, you could say, okay, well, could I have every Friday off for 6 weeks?
Yeah.
Use my 6 vacation days and do it that way. And sometimes that still gives you that uninterrupted time, that best brain time without the same burden on your job. So what this really comes down to is you need to figure out what you need, and then you need to be honest with your employer and give them solutions. Don't just come to them and say, boy, this is going to be rough.
Yeah, I think.
What do you think I should do?
I mean, I've seen people do, like half day, maybe cut back to like 30 or 35 hours a week, something like that. Something that's manageable for everybody. Like everybody's gonna have to give a little bit here. You may not get exactly what you want, which is, 10 weeks of paid vacation. And your employer may not get you working a full 40 or 50-hour week if they really want you to pass this test. So everybody's kind of got to give a little bit. The other thing I think is super helpful that I did when I was taking California while I was working was try to get any time you can off before the test. So even if it's a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, that is going to make a really huge difference versus just, stopping work one day and like rolling into the bar the next.
Yeah. I've even told folks to think about that week before the test. If you take the week off just before the test, so 5 vacation days, you have the 2 days of the weekend before that, plus the 5 days of the work week, plus 3 more days. That's actually a long stretch of full-time study with only taking 5 days off of work. Even if you can only take, let's say, 3 days off of that week before the test, that would still be Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. That's still a pretty long stretch. So you can really look at the calendar and see kind of where you can pull some extra time. And it is going to give possibly 5 to 7 to 10 days of full time study without taking a huge amount of time off of work.
Right, exactly. So I think work with your employer, figure something out, and get creative if you have to, and try to make it work for everybody.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for watching. Please be sure to subscribe, give us a like, and leave us a comment. And check back for future updates on preparing for the bar. Thanks for watching.